So good evening, everybody. This is our regular meeting pushed to today because of the holiday yesterday on June 19th. It's the Mansfield Conservation Commission, June 20th, 2024. We have in attendance myself, and Michael Soares, the chair, Chad Rittenhouse, our secretary, and members Miranda Davis, John Silender, Meg Harper, and staff Michael Stanko. And we're waiting for Will We Met. And so members absent are James Knighton, who's still an alternate, I believe. And
I thought he was.
I think he moved
is
up.
he seated now?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I think it's a 9 person.
Did you count yourself?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yes, I did, but I don't count. 6, 7. I think James is still an alternate.
Yeah, because I think we had one alternate and then one vacancy. Right?
Yeah.
Anyway, James is absent, Aaron is absent, and Will is still absent. Okay. Why don't we go to item 2 for our minutes from May?
These ones aren't the magical template by which we all learned of your ability to rapidly produce. No, I mean, they are your template. They're just not the template by which we learned of your skill at rapidly producing these high quality
minutes. Last time, right? Instead of the actual filled in minutes.
Right. So the only change to the minutes is that it has July 19th or June 19th as the meeting date.
Okay.
So if we could just get that fixed for the record, that'd be great.
Good catch. Yes. I think there was also meeting notes. There were minutes from the April meeting that we tabled because we didn't have a quorum on those. So
absolutely right. So let's see.
So is Witherana not an alternate anymore?
That's correct.
So what's wrong? It does say May 15th.
So on these minutes, the next meeting was listed as happening on June 19th.
Oh, I see.
But that did not happen for the holiday. So I will correct those because I think I was, yes.
Sorry, so I'm jumping around. If anybody have any more comments on these May 15th minutes? Or a motion to approve with that one correction that Chad mentioned?
So moved.
Thanks, Miranda. Any second on Miranda's motion? Okay, Meg, thanks. Meg seconds. Any more discussion? All those in favor, raise your hand or say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Anybody opposed or abstaining?
I'm going to abstain. I was not present. I did not watch the video.
Great. So that's the May minutes.
And then what we can do is, because this is a regular meeting, we can motion if we want to add the April minutes to the agenda so we can take care of those.
Yeah. So I'm going to make a motion that we add our April minutes to this item 2 as a 2B.
I'll second.
Thank you.
Those
are them?
Yep, I just pulled up the April 17th minutes. Meg, let me know if you want me to share.
You're muted, Meg.
But I did.
Yeah, but I was I'm not now, am I? Yeah. No, I wasn't present at the meeting. In April, so I have to abstain.
I can't remember this far back, but anyways.
But you were here. So
yeah, I remember looking at them and not having any concerns when we were about to talk about it last time. So I'm going to make a motion that they're approved as written. A second?
I think you would be.
Can we scroll down a little bit there just to sort of see?
Absolutely. So this was so I'm talking about using monitoring system with CT, the restoration plan for 1725, when that came through with the denser planning. Yep.
Okay.
Well, I'll second.
Yeah. Any other comments or discussion? All those in favor say aye. Aye. Anybody opposed? Anybody abstaining?
Great.
Abstaining.
Looks like there's no public here for comment. So on to 4, easement monitoring from June 2nd.
So I know Erin went, and I heard from Erin that things went well. I wasn't sure if anyone else was able to go.
I wasn't.
I unfortunately was in the Amazon at the time, so.
Unfortunately.
Terrible
I
thing.
just got back yesterday, so just for this meeting, so.
You for ghosting us.
So I was there. I can give a brief report. Lovely property. We learned it was a local swimming hole, the pond that's on the property. Erin was present with her husband, Tori, who works for the town. So was good.
Who grew up swimming there?
And grew up swimming there and was
That's
telling
what I
us
thought.
stories about the pond and growing up swimming there and everything. The wetlands in the back are in wonderful shape. I saw a ribbon snake, which is pretty cool, and I don't think made the report because I had to figure out what it was. I thought it was a garter, but it's not. It's a ribbon. A few concerns were noted. They are clearing vegetation proximate to the pond to maintain the view shed. There is a mowed trail around the pond. These were in the report that's submitted to.
Is that of some concern then, or is it just part of?
Just noted. It's up to you if it's a concern. Technically, we've got a thing on the books now about vegetation within 50 feet of a wetland and waterways and all of that.
Does it look like it was natural vegetation, or does it look like it's been lawn and
It's been
trail
lawn for a good
With
bit.
fertilizer and other stuff that they would put on as opposed to.
Oh, I don't know. I can't speak to.
I mean, not a monoculture.
It was a mowed path, walking path around the pond.
That may be fine, but they should,
make sure they don't
using any kind of like treatment. Mowing is one thing, but fertilizer, pesticides, and other things are not.
I'll check the original easement terms again, because the original easement term, depending upon when it was done, our easements are better or worse. But I'll check over the original easement terms again, just to see if that is. And the property owner seems like a wonderful older woman, so I will just reach out to her and let her know if that is. Like, we noticed your walking path. We're happy you're taking care of the property. Wetlands are in such good shape. Just make sure that you're not putting fertilizer so close to the water, because that's bad for its health. She seems like she would probably be amenable to it. From my interactions, I'm not sure if you got more of a feel for the property owner. She was supposed to be there, right?
She was there and walked as much of the perimeter as her time allowed, and was very nice, and confessed actually that she didn't know where the boundaries were and hadn't actually been to some parts of the property. So my sense is that she is either did not own the house when the easement went into effect, is my sense.
I believe that's true.
So so a lot of it was just her gaining knowledge of what is the easement, what is its extent. We did note some invasive species that if she were so inclined and sought permission from the town, I think would be reasonably manageable proximate to the pond. But on the far side of the, there's a stream that runs through into a larger wetland. On the far side of that is pretty extensive barberry. Probably, unless there's a revegetation plan, not much to do about it.
And I don't think mowing is a problem. I mean, we don't have that much in the way of sort of open areas. So it's mainly just sort of the issue with treating it as a garden.
Yeah, no, as long as they're not adding fertilizers, I don't think it's necessarily a problem to have a small mowed path. But I'll just check in to make sure that they're not doing that, and I'll check the terms of the easement.
Anything else on that?
Unless folks have questions, that was it.
Go ahead, Michael.
So for the next upcoming monitor, so this is something that's happened since the previous meeting, is we have hired 2 seasonal field crew working directly under me, who are walking all of our parks and are doing some water monitoring, working on pulling out water chestnut on the Willimantic River. And so we're doing some baseline invasive work, trail cleanup, reblazings, all of that. One of the people who we hired is already a part-time housing inspector for the town. And so he is already used to contacting property owners and dealing with people who may be a little bit difficult. And as a person who is now basically working close to full-time hours for the town, he was a person who I think in particular could help us with some of those conservation easements if he had a little bit of hands-on experience at the next easement monitor that we schedule for sometime in July. If he could join the easement monitor, go out, learn what you guys are looking for boundary remarking. I could give him some of the, tinier lots that are just in the middle of nowhere, have him send the letters contact. I think it would be both good experience as professional enrichment as well as help us grind through our list. So I just wanted to ask the commission if that seemed like a good idea.
It's like a good idea to me.
Yeah, the small ones too, just kind of, up your route in a certain area, just sort of hit it on the way back. Well, exactly. I guess you got to coordinate the visit and stuff.
Right, but
that sounds good. Yeah.
So I will invite Colby now. I'll schedule the next easement. I'll send out a when to meet. I know it's summer, so people are departing.
No, I'm going until September, so.
You came back just for us?
I did.
John, you feel so special. I'm almost blushing, John.
Yeah, I'd say July's gonna,
You go back to the Amazon.
July might be tricky in that.
It's 196 birds.
Yep.
31 primates.
Yeah, rub it in. Just see any of the cats. That's what I really want to know.
Those best place to see the cats is in the Pantanal.
Did you see any of them?
We didn't go to the Pantanal.
Well, then I can one up you on that because I saw a bobcat 2 weeks ago. So
I saw my neighbors today.
I saw three sloth species. Is that?
That's
pretty amazing.
That's pretty cool.
I'd equate 3 sloths for 1 cat species if we're just making math equivalents.
And I swam with pink dolphins.
Okay, that's not even fair.
In a separate meeting to just drool over all your travels.
Will, is that you? Did you join us via phone?
Willow's iPhone. Is that like Will Smith's daughter, Willow?
Yeah.
Well, see, I thought it was the old movie Willow with what's his name in it.
David Bowie.
Yeah, the one
There you
the
go.
guy who played the Ewok.
You're I will. So Will's join the meeting at 7:13.
Thank you.
So just in terms of upcoming easement monitoring, Michael's going to send out a poll to figure out a potential date.
I'm just going to basically list every weekend in July because I imagine this is going to be a harder one to nail down than when class is in session, and we can go from there. Cool.
Okay, so new business 5A, which is proposed regulations for the planned housing design district, and there's a slideshow here.
Yes. So this is a presentation. So if you don't mind, the Planning and Zoning Commission referred to both yourselves and the Parks and Natural Resources Committee our proposed new multifamily housing regulations. We have a public hearing currently ongoing. It started on Monday and it's going to continue through July. And this is to
July what?
July 17th is July 15th is our next meeting. I think we're intending to keep this open for as long as possible because we want to make sure that the public feels heard. We have a chance to gather feedback on the reasonableness of what we're proposing here. So I wanted to bring it to you all today so that way you can think about it. You don't have to give comments back today, but if you want to begin giving preliminary comments, you can. It's broken up into 3 sections because we have a series of the actual regulations we're creating, as well as a bunch of regulations we're repealing. I will get to that in just a minute. I'm going to share this such that those who are on the phone can see us. This is a presentation we've given several times so far, but we have drafted up new regulations for dense housing. There's been a lot of feedback that was given that the enormous explosion of activity that occurred in terms of development proposals and now development that's under construction was too much. I think that in general, this body does a very good job of advising wetlands, and wetlands does a good idea of making sure that there are standards to hold everything to. But from a zoning standpoint, there's this feeling that we've just embraced too much activity. So we've had a moratorium ongoing for the past 9 months. In that time, we have come up with a new variant on the regulatory process that we think is going to be better for ensuring that we get the types of housing that we are looking for, we reduce housing density, and that we are continuing to protect our natural resources. So just to quickly run through what has actually been approved over the course of the past 2 years, I think, 2 or 3 years at this point, there were 5 housing projects approved in Mansfield. Eagleville Green down in the corner and the Standard at Four Corners up by Four Corners are under construction. The other 3 that were approved were 497 Middle Turnpike, which is the golf course property, the Villages at Four Corners, which is wrapping around Toast Four Corners, and the Hub at Mansfield, which is that property in the purple zone here, right near Yukon, which is going to be where several existing buildings are built into the side of King Hill Road.
Is it
1,100 bedrooms? Yes, the density.
Not beds, but bedrooms.
No, I'm sorry. Beds. It is, but it's a single bed per bedroom because these are, I think, like 3-bedroom units. Okay. It comes up to about 400 units. It's a little weird because it's technically group dwelling, and the way we calculate that is different. But the density is very high. What you'll see is a density spread in these projects of anywhere from about 8.5 units per acre up to, which is relatively low density in terms of the amount of developable land, up to Standard Four Corners is 26 units per acre. Standard Four Corners cashed in on every possible density bonus we offered in our regulations. So normally the way that density works is there's a maximum buildable density. You can have something like 15 units per acre, but you can get more if you're doing things like building structured parking, like a parking garage, building additional infiltration methods, treating water, various things can give you density bonuses in the way our regulations are written right now. And so the Standard Four Corners go up to 26 units per acre. But Mansfield exists in what you can see maybe is all this purple area. This is Yukon, but there's this tiny little notch of color here. This is the planned business 4 district because it exists in a unique area. It has its own unique regulations, and it allowed a much higher density with how our regulations were previously built. So what does this look like? 811 units, multifamily, 1,100 bedrooms or beds because it's 1 bed per room.
Is that are they 1 bed per room?
I believe it is. No, I believe it's 1 bed per room is my recollection, but I'll check if it's not more than 2.
Well, but 2 times 1,100 is going to be a large number.
My recollection is that it is 1 bed per room, and it's basically triplet or quartet singles is the way that these rooms are structured from my recollection. But I can pull those plans. Those are online, so we can check those. So of our very large number of units, we got 91 affordable units, 34 low-income units, and 36 workforce units. So what
is the difference between low income and workforce?
That's an excellent question, and exactly what I was going to jump into next.
I'm sorry.
No. Thank you for cueing me. I love it when that happens. So low income and affordable mean different things. The way that affordability is calculated in the state of Connecticut for the sake of housing is that if it is deed restricted housing that will only be rented to individuals whose income is equal to a certain percent of the area median income. Now, the area median income for Storrs, Connecticut is $82,725 per year. This is data that comes from Fannie Mae and the state. If it is considered affordable housing, if it is offered to those who make 80% of area median income. So if your yearly income is $66,180 or less, you qualify for this reduced cost housing that is reserved for people in your income bracket and which is subsidized via the state. Low income is 60% AMI, which in our area is $49,635 a year. Workforce housing is housing that is offered to those whose total family income is 120% of the area median income. So workforce housing units are for folks who, around here, it's for folks who are making somewhere in the neighborhood of $100,000 as a family unit. So it's per dwelling unit is how these are rented.
So like, assistant professors and that's.
Well, genuinely, yes, which is a common point we have to, it's a common point we have to point out to people. It's a common point we have to.
Scary, right?
No, it's absolutely terrifying. Like, it's a common point we have to point out to people when people are like, well, what's low-income housing? Like, low-income housing, the housing prices have gotten so out of control compared to base salary prices that someone who qualifies for low-income housing is making $65,000 a year and living by themselves because they don't have a partner. That's crazy, right? And they don't want to have a roommate. So,
okay, I didn't mean to.
No. These are good questions. This is exactly the kind of thing. So we have received a certain number of deed restricted housing units through all of these developments. The 34 low income housing units are all being done at Eagleville Green, which is down on the corner. That one is a project that came in through Connecticut State Statute 830G, which is how certain low income housing projects get built. But the rest are embedded in our other complexes. And in addition to that, we also currently have received $5 million to go into an affordable housing trust fund, which is something that the town can use to invest into affordable housing projects to create new sustainable affordable housing as new build where possible.
But some of that is because these projects have not done certain other things, so they're paying into it. So the hub, for example, is responsible for $3 million of that because they did not do what exactly?
That's correct. So the hub didn't build any of these type of units on site. We currently have.
They're counting on this.
Yes, we have a contingency as our regulations are written today. We have a contingency to allow a fee in lieu of building this. We require that you have 15% of your housing units be affordable, which is the 80% threshold, and 7.5% of them be restricted as workforce. So it's 22.5% of all new housing. But we also have something called a fee in lieu, where you can pay that off by giving us money, which we will hypothetically be able to leverage to have a developer come in and develop a suitable site, because the $5 million that we can offer is a pretty substantial push into meeting certain margins, if you can, depending on the scale of the project.
Now, in the past, did some of this money that we've accumulated in the past go into Eagleville Green because that was with outside assistance on that?
I don't recall. Eagleville Green's been in the works for a very long time. And there's only so much I've been able to glean of the town's history, having only been here for a year and a half. But yes, that project does have an enormous amount of various grant fundings.
Okay.
I believe the overwhelming majority of the money that we have received that is in this Affordable Housing Trust Fund is from the hub and the Standard at Four Corners and a couple other places.
No, it's all new. Is part of that not, are they providing any parking? Because that's a lot of bedrooms they're squeezing into this very small place on a map. I'm guessing there is not parking.
There is, the bottom 2 stories of the buildings are structured parking. And they are also providing, they're also adding shuttle bus services and a couple other things that help to hypothetically reduce the car load on the roads. As the regulations were currently written, it is allowable to do that.
So I was only interested in sort of how this might be used in the future. Would it be used in something like Eagleville Green? And is there any feasibility studies in terms of this? Because part of the issue is this is fine, but is it being used wisely going forward?
No, that's absolutely reasonable to ask. So my understanding of this, and I'll check with Jennifer, because once we get the money and we start dealing with the finance, it's generally out of my hands. But that this exists as something that the town council can choose to basically enter into a partnership with and invest in. We have not, to the best of my knowledge, been looking for partners with which to build projects yet. If someone came to us and said, we want to partner with you, we know you have this money, you can invest in us, we will build this, then it would be a discussion. But I think if we are going to start looking for it, it'll be something that's done after we finish our regular.
I just wanted to get whether there was any
there are
history of this sort of stuff.
There is in other towns, and it is interesting to find that for the amount of money that we have in, that can often be the difference between the viability of a project. Okay. But a lot of that data is from times when interest rates were lower. So because we're in a strange new market compared to the last 15 years before the pandemic, we haven't done the feasibility study yet.
So and my understanding is there's pluses and minuses associated with this, and you talk to different people and they have different responses to this. Anyways, it's
yes, exactly. So to just run through a couple of the things that guided us previously and when we got all this development. What we wanted out of our developments based on the 2015 plan of conservation was we wanted parking at the sides and rear of our buildings. We wanted multiple building types. We wanted parking garages to be wrapped with buildings so they weren't visible where parking garages were being built. We wanted them integrated into structures. We wanted central greens and focal points, stormwater amenities for stormwater treatment, and trying to incorporate natural features of construction into site design. These were the things that were important to us in the 2015 POCD. These were, and this is right off of one of our pages. Our 2015 POCD is long and also up for renewal next year. So we are starting to go out. We have our RFQ out right now to find someone who wants to work with us on this. So just real quick, we're going to run through these various units. And I want to talk about first density, and you're going to start seeing something at the bottom here that says how many units do we permitted under PHDD. So we have a new set of regulations which is reducing density and eliminating all density bonuses. First thing that you're going to find out that I'll tell you about the new regulation is it's eliminating all of our density bonuses, which means that standard, which got 392 units in and is very tall, as those can see on the road. I'm out there every week or every other week doing inspections. It's really come a long way. They would only be allowed 227 units, which is a bit more than half, but a lot less than what they can do now. The standard has several different features that we like. It does have a central green. It does have central swimming pool. It does have a parking garage that is wrapped by a building to hide it from the road. It is very tall. They have some of our units, but they also paid a fee in lieu. The hub, which we don't have as good renderings of yet, this is the incredibly dense one that would exist on King Hill Road, fronting on both sides of it and on North Eagleville. They were able to, with the ways that our regulations were written for developable density, get about 411 bedrooms per acre, which if you assume it's 4 bedrooms per is 100 units per acre. They would be allowed 40% of that under the new regulations we're proposing. These buildings are looking to be somewhere between 5 and 8 stories. That would put it down to around 3. 497 Middle Turnpike, which was the golf course property. This one has a variety of different housing types. We've got 3-story townhouse style, more mansion style. This one asked for 261 units, 8.6 units per acre. It would be able to get 243 units. So its site plan would not be markedly changed. You can see this one incorporates a lot more natural features, a lot more lawn, more open spaces. It's built into a very large area of land, which is everything at the back is being permanently preserved. I'll show that next slide. Kind of built into the landscape. Here we're using, the rendering would show that we've got various stormwater features here, existing pond. So this is kind of more strongly what we wanted out of the 2015 POCD. You're hearing more of those terms that I wanted, yes.
So this is, in terms of your density, it's the number of units for the entire property, not the buildable part of it, which is going to be different.
So
in your,
that's a great question.
Right.
So it's the developable acres. So it doesn't include wetlands. Wetlands are not included in developable acres. Slopes over 15% are not included in developable acres. That's what we do already. So those things don't count as developable acres. You got easements on them. Those don't count as developable acres. The plan for this property, if it gets built, is to deed the back 25 acres around this piece, which is a town-owned parcel, to the town. Now, much of this is wetland, but much of it isn't. But when we do calculate density, it's only calculating high and dry land that's not over 15% steep slopes. So This one is closer in many ways to the density that we're anticipating seeing. It's closer in many ways to the things that we wanted out of the POCD. Down here at Eagleville Green, we have a density that is equivalent to what they're building. This area here is part of a denser development zone on South Eagleville Road, and would be allowed to have 15 units per acre. With the total acreage that they had, total available land, they could have about as many units as they're getting, which is about 42 units is what they're building now. Now, we've already heard a lot of feedback about the fact that these are really tall, very imposing from the road. This doesn't change anything about our heights. However, when we get to how this actually works, we'll be talking more about how this process happens, right? So we have our overall site plan is to have a stormwater basin here, which will drain off this way and have a series of, after having infiltration, any excess water has an outflow here onto biotreatment swale before draining into the wetlands on the east side and retaining that traditional groundwater pattern. This one would be able to build under the new regulations pretty much as it is. Finally, we have the Villages of Four Corners, which is the one that will wrap around those four corners. This one has large existing wet swales along the road that will be remaining and incorporated into the site design. Different types of buildings broken up again. This one has, because in order to make the site design work, it was approved to do a small amount of wetlands fill. They are doing offsite wetlands remediation there's some standard rate for this. It's not a formula I know off the top of my head.
Can we just stay on this image for 1
Absolutely.
second? Because when we reviewed this, and I think you can see it really well in the lower image, the amount of impervious surface on this project was arcane and ridiculous. And
yes, so exactly. That's my big concern.
I just hope that our new reg, I mean, they pretty much have built out that entire parcel with impervious surface.
Yes.
Next to the wetland that we were concerned about with the standard. So just something that popped out.
That's a huge, thorn in my side that I'm going to continually complain about.
Anyways, impervious surface?
Impervious surface.
I agree with you.
And it should be into the new regs, So low impact development needs to be in there.
So we're going to get to what's in the regs versus what we're working on that isn't in the regs, because this is part of a larger reg renewal package. But here is the thing that we stopped. Back a couple months back, we threw in a moratorium that ends August of this year, that developments in excess of 5 units with an density of more than 3 units per acre are prohibited. So we've stopped all development. That's why you haven't seen anything new pop up on the planning and zoning list. We have had a lot of feedback from a lot of different people. We've been working with these folks called TIPE, Planning and Policy Group. They're a planning group who we work very closely with. They're experts at a lot of things they do. And we've come up with this thing called a planned housing design district. Previously, multifamily housing was allowed in all of our planned business districts. It was allowed in the RAR 90 zone, which is the Rural Agricultural Residential 90,000 square foot minimum lot size zone. What this zone covers is the majority of town. The majority of town that isn't industrialized has an allowance where you can get multifamily housing in via special permit. It's just the same as our building, our planned business districts. So the majority of the town was open to the implementation of new multifamily housing projects, which are often dense and often mixed-use commercial. The first thing we are doing with these is stripping that out and saying that you are going to have a higher bar if you are going to be building outside of some of our denser business districts. So what that looks like is that any development that comes in with more than 6 units, which has either detached single families on a single lot, duplexes, multiplexes, apartment complexes, these have to have a planned housing design district in order to go forward. Planned housing design district is what is called a floating zone. Normally, if you look at a zoning map, you will see, I can just jump ahead here. If you look at a zoning map of the town, what you will see is that every parcel is in 1 or more zones. And that when you go to the regulations, these zones have certain uses that are allowed and setbacks and all that. A floating zone is a zone that does not exist on the map until it is what is called landed. It is a hypothetical zone that we could, after someone demonstrates that their parcel fits the standards for it, place on the map. But as opposed to, for example, the institutional zone, which is Yukon and held together with Yukon's property, the R90 zone, which is this orange piece, which is defined by a slightly denser residential pattern in support of the university, or down by the mall, we have the Planned Business 1 zone, which is based on a dense commercial pattern fed by this. A floating zone is not based on existing land patterns necessarily. It is based on a hypothetical potential proposed use based on meeting certain criteria that we've set ahead of time. In order to land a planned housing design district, you have to come before the Planning and Zoning Commission and explain to them why it is appropriate for this parcel to have a multifamily housing development on it. It is not assumed to be acceptable everywhere anymore. Because when you have something that's allowed by a special permit, it is assumed to be acceptable as long as you can meet certain thresholds. You have to demonstrate that this is going to be acceptable for a large number of reasons. Depending upon which zone you're in, you have to meet certain baseline thresholds. If you are in one of our planned business districts, which I pointed out a few of, or the South Eagleville Road Housing Opportunity District, which is mostly the housing authority down the road, there's no minimum lot size, and you have a maximum density of 15 units per acre. You also have to be on one of our major roads. We've heard loud and clear from a lot of people that people don't like development on or immediately adjacent to some of our smaller residential roads that should not have large amounts of traffic going up and down them. We don't want to see it happen. We know that the townspeople don't want to see it happen. We're listening. It's only our big roads. Our arterial and collector roads are listed in our zoning regulations, and it's a collection of our larger, more traveled roads in town. If you're in the Pleasant Valley Residential Agricultural District, which is a special place downtown, you get 8 units per developable acre. You can only do single family detached or duplexes. If you are in any other zone, you need 5 acres minimum. If you want to do single family detached or duplexes, you can have 10 units in a developable acre. If you want to do multiplex, you only get 8. So you'll notice that none of our approved projects that we've had thus far have been below 8 developable units per acre. The lowest have been 8.6. So just automatically, what we are trying to do here, or anything else, we're trying to bring down that development density. We're trying to encourage you to use the larger lots or acquire more land, which you're going to put some of in preservation. You need to be able to demonstrate you have a lot of land that not all of it's going to be built on. There's no more density bonuses. We've gotten rid of all those. The standard, which could have only, before getting density bonuses, built to 15 units per acre, was able to capitalize on a bunch and get up to 26 units per acre, wouldn't fly anymore. So automatically we're scaling down density, which is good insofar as it prevents sprawl. It's not great if you just continue to cut down things and you're just spreading out. Density can be a good thing in city planning if you're concentrating people on a smaller amount of land, as long as you have the infrastructure to support it. So what else are we doing to make sure that happens?
Mike, I just want to...
Yeah, so stop me at any time.
The multifamily, the previous structure where you could come and petition for multifamily on any RAR 90.
Yep.
That is no longer existing. It's just these zones that you talked about have.
You can come in and petition for multifamily in RAR 90, but you must have at least 5 acres. You are immediately slowed down.
Okay, gotcha.
And this is an important thing. It is not assumed that it is a good place to build anymore. The way that when you have a use on your use table in zoning, per the various case law that comes out of this, if you have a use on your use table, which every town has for whatever its uses are, ever its zones, it is assumed that as long as you can meet certain benchmarks of demonstrating that you are doing a good job, technical benchmarks, that it is appropriate. That this is an appropriate use for parcels in this zone as long as you can check all your boxes. But that is not what we are doing anymore. What we are doing, yes, to start off with this is not a use, this is a zone. So if we go to our zoning map, basically imagine if there was a special color on here. What are we not using? We're using a lot of colors on here.
Black.
Chartreuse.
Chartreuse. We're not using chartreuse. So imagine there's chartreuse on here. If you have a chartreuse zone, it's nowhere on here. You have to demonstrate that the chartreuse zone makes sense before you can even put in a wetlands application, before you can even begin going through your engineering design documents. You have to demonstrate that your parcel makes sense for it to build there. If we say it doesn't make sense, no build.
How stringent is that being judged? How stringent is it going to be as opposed to a rubber stamping process?
That's a great question. Hold on to that question because I'm going to get there.
Okay.
Now you say a zoning map cannot exist, but in fact, what you've described is a straightforward GIS exercise because you do arterial roads, you do your other minimum things, you can actually put a chartreuse map on here.
You know,
those that are potential floating zone sites, and it should be done for transparency, if nothing else.
I agree with you. So we're actually working on that right now.
Okay.
We're actually working on that because there was a whole back and forth on the fact that the town of Mansfield defined a bunch of stuff back in the day as arterial roads and collector roads.
But there's the state.
Yes.
So you've got to work out the difference between state and town.
So that's why we don't have that map yet.
Okay.
Is we're trying to go back in and figure out, was this just the list at a time point? Or did we set this apart for a reason? That list has been in there for a while, and at a certain point, there's an institutional knowledge decay of who was around and remembers why this list was together in the first place. So we're working with our consultant. We have a tool for that. We have that layer. We're going to be ready to put it up for July 15th. The plan is, I think,
for transparency, if nothing else.
No, for transparency, I 100% agree with you. The plan is to have it for July 15th.
Okay.
Of course, the difficult part with this is that if there's nothing stopping you from buying a bunch of adjacent parcels and building a larger parcel, right? So but yes, you're making a good point. So
can I just go back to that?
Yes, absolutely.
You also have a criteria that it has to be on a collector road and on a parcel identified as compact residential.
Yes.
So can we see that?
Absolutely. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull up the future land use map. And I'm going to share again because I shared one thing for Mansfield City. So the future land use map is a particular map, map 8.3.
Maybe we don't need to dig into the.
No. It's an important thing to have.
Well, I want to go home at some point. So not to be selfish, but we don't need to.
Hey, but this is important stuff, you know. I think it's
It is. My life is important.
There was
So let me just open up the plan of conservation development. Let's find map 8.3. Still load. Thank you, those of us online, for holding.
So, Michael, do you think the public hearing is going to close on the 15th?
I think we're going to go through September. I think our maximum time is September. I think we're going to leave it open as long as possible because we want to gather people's feedback and we want to iterate.
Period when the moratorium ends.
Moratorium ends in August. So what we're actually proposing doing is we are proposing repealing all of our existing multifamily housing regulations before this is adopted.
Okay.
We are proposing repealing the creation of new multifamily housing in Mansfield. Even though the moratorium will expire ahead of time, we're going to repeal it by the end of the moratorium, and then we will approve the new stuff after the moratorium. And if this fails, because people can't get support, then we go back to the drawing board and we'll figure it out again.
What happens in that interim period?
Yeah.
There will be no valid way. There will be no valid way in the town of Mansfield.
That's anarchy.
There will be no valid way to build multifamily housing regulations.
Okay.
To build multifamily.
I have one other question that I bet you is not anywhere in here because I think it's a dream that I don't think it's probably even legal. But ideally, what I would love to see in a plan like this is that when a big development comes in, there's some kind of a built-in cooling off or acclimation period afterwards, during which the town gets to assess where we have now moved to before approving more. Instead of just approving many of them almost simultaneously, which I understand the simultaneous thing could still happen, but sequentially very quickly. It just seems like having some kind of a cooling off period after large ones would allow the town to reassess if things are working, if they need to. So is there any way that it is, but it had to be put in there as this, oh my God, what have we done thing, instead of something is, okay, big development. Okay, now everything's on pause for.
So fortunately,
could that be built?
That's
a little bit of an isolated area over in Davis Road. So we see it in the northwest, right?
Fortunately, that's a feature.
Well, no, I have seen it. I drive over there all the time because my kids get off the bus over there a few times a week. But so I've seen it, which is why I'm asking.
All right.
Fortunately, that is a feature of this regulation, because this regulation is highly discretionary to the Planning and Zoning Commission, choosing whether or not they want you to allow people to land the zone. Landing a zone legally is extremely discretionary. As I was talking about how the courts have generally found that if you have something on your use table, you basically, even if it's under a special permit, you've said, this is acceptable as long as you can meet certain standards. And that is why in certain ways it becomes very hard to deny things if it reaches planning and zoning and you have a very technical team behind it. Because if you can meet all of the check boxes and convince people you've met your check boxes, that's good. To land a zone, you have incredible discretion on whether or not you're going to allow a new zone to come onto the map, which means that if somebody comes in and proposes a project that will land the zone and they do it, and then someone else comes in before it's built, the commission can say, no, thank you, even before they do that. Now, it's not built into the regulations, yes, but depending upon the will of your elected officials.
That's the part I'm uncomfortable with right there, because I understand that the discretion is going to be there and it can go both ways. And it's good that in some ways that it can go both ways, but seems like there should be a checklist that they are running through when they're considering whether or not to give that discretion. And one of the lines on the checklist should be, have there been recent developments approved that the impact of which is as yet unforeseen, and da 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 da. And should that, there should be a list.
And we don't know that because the new developments are still being built.
Right, exactly. And so it just seems like having some kind of a list of the things that will be considered, that not might be considered, but must be considered when they are deciding whether or not to use their discretion, should be in there.
So
yeah, that's a good point. That there are criteria under their discretionary.
I would like to make it a little bit more
guiding.
So how many towns in Connecticut have this floating zone, and how long have they had this, and what are the suits that have come as a result of this? Do we know those figures?
So that's a great question, John. It's like 4 great questions, but we'll take them one at a time. So many towns use floating zones of some degree, and the courts have validated that they are an allowable planning concept.
Do we actually have a number?
I mean,
I've heard that
on the top of my head,
relatively few in Connecticut.
I know that Glastonbury is proposing to adopt one right now. I know that there's a joint meeting next week that I can't go to because there's a proposal to make all new development in large parts of that town with this concept, because it gives more discretionary power before feeling like you've been forced by the developer to do something. So just to jump into what are some of the other checkboxes that you have to meet, Miranda, about one of these points, we're just going to throw these people up here. This is the future land use map. So with our plan of conservation and development, we created, and this is the royal we, but the town created a map that is proposing what future land uses should be allowed in this area based on the various values of the land and conservation. This is kind of the map that exists behind our zoning map. Why are things zoned a certain way? It's based on our future land use map. Compact residential is the map in brown. It's also on page 316 of 444 of our plan of conservation and development, a behemoth document you can kill a person with. I assume
there's a transitional thing too.
Yes, so compact residential transitional and mixed use center transitional. These are the land use types that were controversial earlier in last year, and is why we have seen a very large amount of development in this area. Compact residential is areas that we have determined make sense for high density because they are either adjacent to existing highly developed industrial areas and institutional corridors, or population centers. Mixed-use centers. Mixed-use centers are those places that have a traditional pattern of development or that are existing commercial and also close to such areas. You'll see mixed-use centers include down here the mall and various properties in here, where we have both residences as well as industrial. And then, of course, what we have around many of these, you'll see transitional zones. So those are in light brown and this lighter red. These are zones where the idea is you don't want to go directly hard cutoff from the traditional rural New England development pattern into these denser zones. So you create these areas which are supposed to be reduced to density, but still allowing some of those uses as you trickle out to create a softer border between uses.
Why wasn't that done sort of more across the zones? Or maybe you weren't here, but I mean, we have compact residential in the south and the center that don't have those transitional zones next to them.
Until I bring up the GIS and compare all these layers at once, for whatever reason, this is just incredibly high fidelity map, so it loads very slow, so I haven't done it a lot. Certain areas of this are buffered by conservation easements. Certain areas of this are buffered by very large existing farms. Why were there not existing rural to commercial zones, for example, along the other side of Puddin Lane, or to create?
Are on here though.
Well, like at
looks like
where they tore down Mansfield Apartments.
That's Yukon-owned land. Yes, where they tore down Mansfield Apartments.
Either side of Davis.
That should be compact transitional as opposed to compact. Because they're proposing to build like a 7-story building right next to Lost Sanctuary.
So they don't have to follow.
Yeah, Yukon ignores us.
So our zone.
No, Yukon completely ignores us because Yukon is the state and the state devolves all power to us.
Right, but one objection to one of the things that Yukon was doing was, of course, the height of the buildings and what was considered to be that transitional zone. So, but you said that height of buildings hasn't been built into these new regulations earlier.
We have existing height limits.
Okay.
We have existing height limits, which are.
So the standard, right, is within that height limits, huh?
So there
That's the case
are.
About.
Yeah.
The standard.
But not for the but the standard isn't in transitional, right?
The standard is in mixed use center.
They're trying to, but it just seems like the height limits. It seems based on responses that the height limits we previously had are higher than public seems to want them to be.
Yes.
So are they being adjusted?
Those are one of those things that we are looking at, but aren't in this set of regulations. So that's a performance standard revision. I've talked about the performance standards a lot.
Because it just seems like that's a lot of the complaints. And
we've heard a lot about that, about the standards very tall. We've heard a lot about that is very tall. A lot of that comes from roof mechanicals. So what winds up happening is roofs wind up very tall because you are hiding all of your mechanicals on your roof because it was a big trend in city plan of get your mechanicals off the ground. It's ugly. You have to hide it, put them on the roof. Well, that increased roof heights.
Right.
So it was an unintended side effect of a phase of city planning that we are now starting to regret because it makes all of our buildings much taller and more terrifying. Those down there are only 2 stories tall, and yet they are behemoths. And we 100% agree that that is true.
We're about the
Eagleville Green.
Part of the behemothsy of them is that they're all one color right now, though. So once they're sited, they won't.
It's also the proximity to the road and perspective.
Now that one is also.
That's a lot closer to the road. The artistic drawings work, but let's not get into this.
That one we have actually even less control over because it was an 830G project, which gives it a lot of exemptions, but variously.
So on the height thing though, the density caps that are in place though, doesn't make sense to build buildings very tall if you're only getting 8.8 units an acre.
Yep.
Like just the mechanics of it are, everyone lives in the Leaning Tower of Pizza, they get
right
that height
but none of this makes sense based on what makes sense.
But now to be fair, part of the height is garages, and I feel much happier about garages than I do about the same number of impervious surface parking areas that we see the village at Four Corners is going to have. You know, it's just a massive parking lot, which is going to be
there's
terrible.
a trade-off there.
It's their cost too, like building a parking lot versus a garage is orders of magnitude
cheaper.
In terms of the amount of impervious surface. That's right.
Yeah, no, but
it's way cheaper.
Way better for us for impervious, but it's way cheaper for them to build a parking lot instead of
yeah, well, that you know,
right.
You got to hold the feet to the fire.
Oh, I know. I'm just saying that. So all these factors come into play.
Yeah, Meg?
Yeah, Meg.
Two questions. One is about the parking garage thing. And I always wonder why, I mean, can we not make people do parking garages and say no to all that impervious parking? Because I remember for the standard, the one at Four Corners, I remember them saying, we just can't build it if we have to build a parking garage. We can only build it if we have this ridiculously large parking lot. This really large parking lot. So maybe that's, for their economics, what they feel like, what they want to get back out of it. But why can't we have in our regulations, if we really find that this amount of impervious surface is harmful to the environment, why can't we just say, no, you can't have X% of impervious surface? And if you want that amount of parking, it has to be in a garage.
We can. If we do that, and nothing gets built at all because everything becomes beyond economic feasibility, then we continue to fail to address Connecticut's housing crisis, which is a separate thing ongoing, where Connecticut has one of the worst deficits of housing stock in the nation. So we are working from forces that are pulling from different ends here when it comes to a city planning basis. And from a conservation commission perspective, wanting to see more structured parking and more impervious surfaces, that's a perfectly valid comment to make that you would like to see, because that is well within your charge. And I think that's a very reasonable thing to have someone saying. It's an important thing to have someone saying.
I have the following things to say. I want to see climate change consciousness. I want to see smart growth.
Yep.
I want to see sustainable zoning. I want to see low impact development. And I want to see an integrated impact on wetlands and critical streams. So what we've seen with the development at Four Corners is that those were judged individually in terms of their impact on Cedar Swamp Brook, as opposed to an integrated view of how this and other cascading effects are going to impact a stream, which is a class 1 stream. So I want to see part of that actually in detail as regulations as need to be addressed.
It's one of those things that I think Miranda's cooling off period being in the regulations makes a lot of sense for. It makes sure that you get a chance to force people to consider existing conditions once things are already built. As for
low impact development, UConn is a leader in this.
UConn is.
You can go and they can give you particular plans in terms of how they have addressed low impact development. And as a result of low impact development, the Eagleville Brooks is a much better, much healthier stream than it was 20 years ago.
That's absolutely true. We have various low impact development checklists that we have required in the past, though there is an argument to be made that we should tighten our regulations for stronger requirements of low impact. Of course, low impact and impervious surface work differently in different ways. One of the things that I'm working on that I'll tell you about now, as opposed to getting to where we're going, is reducing impact on superficial aquifer. So we have a lot of areas where we have coarse or swamp superficial aquifers, which are particularly sensitive to penetration into the ground, as opposed to particularly small grain. And I know you know this because this is exactly what you do. But the goal of looking at this and these superficial aquifer maps is to consider what types of low impact development we want in certain areas, and to try to encourage that with a series of layers for the town to adopt, of saying, if you're in these areas and you're doing certain types of parking, do we want you to do impervious surfaces? For example, in highly pervious soils, having a large parking area that winds up with a pervious surface could be argued to be worse if you are having lots of drippings from cars directly into the aquifer. So there's various things I'm working on. I'm working with FHI who is a different contractor on improving regulations for stuff like that. We are thinking about these things, at least for those 2 points.
But the criteria, I want to see the criteria. You know, they're going to be in this, which, you know, and it gets down to the differences between shall, should, and must.
Yes.
And that's a critical thing. If you put it kind of loosey-goosey, they can come in and then argue that, well, you know, we're going to do most of this, we're not going to do that. But if it has must, and it's perfectly legal to put must in the regulations,
I know.
Then that is going to hold, particularly in the most sensitive areas. Again, it can be done in more sensitive, less sensitive areas. But if you're going to build in a sensitive area, then there's got to be musts in there.
We've at the public hearing, Francis made the same observation that yes, your shalls, musts, and shoulds are messed up. So we've gone back through and we are currently evaluating our shalls, musts, and shoulds. So John, give me your list at the end so I can make sure that I have all of those points in there. Meg, you have another question? There was a second.
It seems like John might be talking about cumulative impacts, you know, cumulative environmental impacts. And I think that that's really valid, you know, and I support that. I had a question from a little bit before. What has happened to the HUD Special Opportunity Zone, and how does that fit into the new plan?
Opportunity zones are not something that the town itself regulates. Now, I don't know how an opportunity zone got laid on the town that existed before.
It was HUD. It was a federal thing, I think.
Yes. Are we talking about opportunity zones?
Yes.
Yes.
So, like when Four Corners became the special opportunity zone, which seemed to sort of trump everything else.
So
that still happen?
So I don't think it still happens in general. Under the Trump presidency, to use the word there, the opportunity zones were created as a way for economically disadvantaged towns to be able to bring in capital for development to grow businesses and thus local employment opportunities through certain tax incentives.
Right, but that's how we ended up with so much of Four Corners. I think in part because the income was calculated based on including student income.
Yes, unfortunately, you do have to take that up with the census office.
No. But what I'm saying is, despite all of everything I'm seeing tonight, I really like. But can everything be sort of upset? Can the apple cart be upset with another HUD Special Opportunity Zone that sort of trumps all of the good planning and good wishes here?
Hypothetically, no, because the reason why the opportunity zone was disastrous to catastrophize as certain people have, no one here, but certain people have walked into my office. Because we allowed that housing type anywhere, and it was suitable anywhere, once those with large amounts of capital to invest in creating these things felt it was economically advantageous to do so, they invested and came with large applications, and they were allowed in our regulations so long as you hit standards. By default, nothing is allowed in our regulations anymore. You have to land the zone. You have to prove to us that it should be there. So hypothetically, this stops the creation of a new special opportunity zone from making it very, very attractive that we haven't previously considered, and then people coming in and saying, well, it's allowed to be a special permit, and we've done all of your checkboxes in your regs. Right. So it does provide a little bit of cushion there. I know you want to get home, and I do too. So I'm going to just run through the rest of this. The way that, and this is available for everyone, but this is how we actually calculate developable area. So it excludes certain things. But the way that things work right now, I need to talk about because that'll make clear how things will run in the future. The way things work right now is if I want to build a multifamily housing development in Mansfield, I would begin with a discussion with staff. I would submit a wetlands application first. I submit a wetlands application first because I have already determined that what I want to do is allowable in this zone. So I start off with a wetlands application. The wetlands application is a technical review. You are looking for reasons to deny based on significant impact to wetlands. A potential significant impact to wetlands is why you deny at wetlands. And that is based on, we have a list of 8 criteria. We've recently added, you should have buffers of 50 feet of natural vegetation should be maintained wherever they exist. That's one of our 8 terms, but there are 7 others about potential impacts to water quality, et cetera, et cetera. There are certain things we can't regulate for at wetlands. We can't protect wildlife in of itself. There was a whole court case about that. But you can protect any of the physical features of a wetland. If the applicant demonstrates through engineering review and various things that they can protect all of the aspects of wetlands and the Wetlands Commission approves them, you go on to planning and zoning, where you're talking about all the things that we hear about commonly. Traffic, we're talking about lighting, we're talking about various things. If you get that approval, you're done. You go for your zoning permit, which is a validation check. You get your building permit, which is a validation check, and you can build. So the process goes wetlands, which is checking for technical. Although wetlands does have a little bit more wiggle room to be discretionary than planning and zoning special permit. Then you go for planning and zoning special permit, which is, again, technical. You are primarily looking for, do you meet the check marks? Are you proving to us that you can do everything? And then you go get your staff validation checks at the end. The new process works like this. In addition to the normal pre-application staff review, instead of starting at wetlands with a technical review for stormwater quality feasibility studies, you start with a discussion with the Planning and Zoning Commission. You present what is called a conceptual application to them. You come and you say, we are thinking about building a development on this property. We like it because of these reasons. We think it meets your general standards for these reasons. We think it is suitable for multifamily housing because of X. And this is our rough design of what we're thinking. This is our housing development. This is our layout. This is what we want to do. You come to us with a general conceptual plan. The design considerations, which the conceptual plan should have, or maybe shall have, I have to go back and check that, John, includes everything such as your site design and orientation. How are you connecting neighborhoods? How are you dealing with your parking, your open space recreational areas, on-site amenities, your landscaping? What is your building design? What is your facade? What is your recycling and solid waste disposal? What is your bicycle parking? Yes.
Something here, sorry, John, but something here should, this is where we could capture water and buffers. And one thing I'm thinking a lot about is where are we encouraging these larger developments to monitor groundwater? Because we've permitted some stormwater subsurface treatment systems, and if they don't have the appropriate separation of groundwater, and I think Standard ran into that issue once they started building, like that, we want to know that at this early phase. Like if you're in an area that doesn't have that separation to groundwater, then you really need to scale back your design or not propose that density at the site. But I feel like this early site considerations, we're close. We're talking about open space. And I don't know what the language is, but it feels like there's something here related to kind of the Concom and IWA charge.
Absolutely. So this is a place to put stuff in.
Right.
Yes.
So one thing, of course, is there's
low impact development obviously should go in here.
There was no benchmark, and all of these developments did no assessment of current water quality whatsoever,
or quantity,
or nothing. All they did is have sewer designers come in with 1,000 pages of models of how they're going to handle some flow rate. So none of that goes in there. But this is exactly where I want to see climate change consciousness, smart growth, sustainable zoning, low impact development. And a greater impact on of successive development on sensitive watersheds. This is where this goes. I want to see that in there.
Water quality, groundwater, low impact, climate.
It would be great if wording having it be consideration of cumulative impact in, with other or current developments in mind could be included wherever it may apply in here. It would be great if it could be worded in such a way that it is the cumulative impact of this project with other projects that may be underway or even just currently in application as well.
Right. That's fair.
That is tricky.
I have
know.
I have to look at the legality. Technically, it's hard. Legally, there's a whole thing about protecting a potential, like the potential harm to potential things is something that by case law, you
It
can't.
just almost felt like the
potentially
way
can't
to
do
game the system was for all of these development
To hit us
companies
at
to get
once.
together and be like, hey, let's all go in now.
Yes.
And
With no effect of other than their particular footprint there.
Yes.
There's no assessment of how that footprint is going to be affected by other co-occurring footprints on the overall quality of the stream.
Now,
and there's no benchmark. We have nothing to know what now is the current quality of the water coming out of that.
Now, fortunately, one of the things that we can't do, because this is incredibly discretionary, is if someone comes before us, we've already got someone else before us, we're going to say, so we need you to go away for 6 months because we're not going to consider this. We're going to table this. This is a zone change. We can just do that. We need you to go away for 6 months because we are working on this other thing and we really need to consider its impacts.
but I don't see that written on a list, that consideration of other current, like I would love to see that written. That is going to be something that is considered, because otherwise I just don't trust that it's going to happen via inherited word of mouth and culture.
You know what? That's fair. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, thank you. If I get hit by a bus tomorrow, then Jennifer gets hit by a bus tomorrow. We're really going to struggle.
Who's gonna tell the new people that this is the charge and that's what you're supposed to be considered? I want to see it written.
We can do that.
I mean, this is sort of the usual thing. Now you talk about bicycle parking. I would say, well, where's electric plug-in outlets? Is that being done in these places?
That's actually, I think there's.
That's going to be, that is part of the overall carbon footprint that we're looking at to reduce here. That goes back to climate change consciousness.
I actually think there's either something state or federal. I was at a planning conference earlier this month. We were talking about new rules coming about from new developments requiring certain numbers of parking spaces.
I'm not sure any of the new developments are having plug-ins.
Is this further fleshed out for the applicant to kind of like this?
We have basically sub bullets for each of these points.
Okay,
I mean, this could have been written 20 years ago, is my sort of worry.
Like heat attenuation, like there's all kinds of things that can go into these as sub bullets.
Send me your sub bullets. I want your sub bullets. I want to make it comprehensive.
Trees.
Yeah, well, yes, trees are really the best thing for attenuation. After the conceptual development review, we ask people to come up with answers to all sorts of questions. The nice thing about this is that it gives us a lot of checks that we can look at immediately, say, are you going to do this right? If we just say, whoa, absolutely not, too much development in an area, we can say no. If we like it, though, and after going back and forth 1 or 2 times with the developer, we're saying, yeah, this could be good. This isn't a monoculture of developments. We have multiple different housing types. This is well designed using a lot of LID. We're getting something we like here. It's meeting a housing hole. They are going to be able to come in with the zone change and what we call the master development plan. When we approve the zone change, we approve the master development plan at the same time. There's a public hearing at this point, like we normally do for a planning and zoning meeting. We hold a public hearing, people can come in, make themselves heard. And if we approve master development plan, what happens is that they then go to wetlands and have to meet all of the technical standards of wetlands that we normally have them meet. You have to meet all the technical standards of wetlands. If you can pass wetlands and all this technical standards and ensure you're doing your environmental protections, and you have an approved master development plan that you agree to, you then come in for a site plan application.
No public hearing.
No, right after master development plan.
It's right there.
So there is a public
No
hearing
public hearing.
after at the master development plan, there is a public hearing. So when someone comes in for, this is my concept, this is my concept, we've gone back and forth on this a couple times, but there's a public hearing.
That's a good point, though. Once they get into wetlands,
there is a public hearing.
There is a public.
Wetlands requires a public hearing.
Okay.
Then, after you get your public hearing at wetlands, and you've had your public hearing at planning and zoning, which we did before wetlands, you come in for what is called a site plan approval. A site plan approval is a different level of approval that requires less of the commission than a special permit normally does. There's all these things in statute. At this phase, there is no public hearings. So there are still 2 public hearings. And this is something we realized we didn't clarify very well at the last public hearing that we were having about these regulations. There are still 2 public hearings. You still have to demonstrate that you're meeting all of your zoning standards and that you are going to do, and you're only going to get to do this if we like your idea. And you still get your public hearing at wetlands. That's required by mandate, by statute. We can't waive that. That's going to happen. You have to meet all your technical wetland standards. But then
the details are the site application, no public hearing.
The site plan application is.
That's where the details are.
No.
You sort of like, we like your concept, but what are the details?
So the master development plan and the wetlands commission, you pass through both of these. So you come in with your development. Then you come before us with your site plan. Your site plan has to substantially match your master development plan. You have to do everything when it comes to, when you finally have to come to us with all of your engineering, right? This is the phase when you come to us with all of your engineering. We need all of your engineering for wetlands. We need all of your engineering for your site plan application. When you come to us with all of your engineering, you have to prove that you could do, that you did everything that the master development plan said you would.
So it is problematic that there is no opportunity at that moment to, but to comment or question engineering.
Yes, so that's pretty serious.
So it seems like there's a conceptual phase that can be commented on, but once everything's really dialed in, there should be an opportunity to comment on that. It seems like the only comment would be to submit written testimony, and even is that acceptable? But it just seems like
it's always acceptable to submit letters to the commission about something on the agenda. But
it seems
if there's no public hearing, then the public doesn't know about this. So they don't submit letters.
I mean, there will be 2 public hearings.
It's not that they don't.
Right.
Yeah, I agree, Michael. But John makes a good point that the sequencing is important. And if we're at the final stage where engineering is really dialing in the project and stormwater management, you know, and H and all that kind of stuff, like.
But we will have a comprehensive stormwater review because it will be at wetlands. Wetlands will still capture comprehensive stormwater and wetlands impacts. But with that said, the important question that we're hearing here is what degree of information is available at step 1, right? What degree of engineering is acceptable
in that master development
at the master development plan?
Yeah, I guess my assumption is that there's going to be a good bit of change between that and the site plan.
There's not supposed to be. There's not supposed to be any change between that. You were supposed to come back with a fleshed out version of what you said you were going to build. And if you don't, it's automatically rejected.
But I would assume that any of the applicants coming in are going to see that this is the process and go, well, I'm going to invest as little as I can in fleshing out details until I get past these first few steps. And then they're going to come back with their site plan application that will have the details. And that would be the concern.
And there's been some history of this because I've seen preliminary plans, and then the final plan, look, you know, coincidentally, you know, has some similarities to the original site plan. But there's been a lot of changes that occur between the original site plan and the.
We're a very jaded group.
So, I know you're very jaded, but I would like to. One of the issues that no, I'm not. You got to understand. I'm defending this because I think this is an improvement over what exists. I'm not jaded. Yeah. The issue here that we're having fundamentally is ultimately there is always a flaw in every single regulation. There is no such thing as a perfect regulation. Yeah. And if we live in a democracy where we actually have people elected who have to decide this, who aren't a panel of unelected, unaccountable experts, the weak point is always trusting that elected people who are not experts are going to do the right thing and play by the rules and listen to your experts, but also simultaneously listen to the will of the community. So there's always a weak point.
I have another sequencing question.
Yes, these are good.
This is going to reveal my lack of knowledge of the system, but I remember during some of the development a few years ago that one of the things that came up was that people only really learned of the hearings when it was the planning and zoning hearing that came up. Yep. And they had questions to do with the economics and the taxes that were going to be paid to the town and things. And then they came to that hearing and they were told, oh, you can't ask those questions now because that is not in the remit of this. And we're not discussing that anymore. But they had never had an opportunity that they were aware of to weigh on it previously. So I'm wondering where that plays into this and when people get to ask it.
So taxes are not something you can pretty much ever ask questions about at planning and zoning, because planning and zoning formally doesn't have anything to do with tax. It's not in our power.
So, because I'm just thinking about it and thinking, okay, well, you know, some part of what planning and zoning though is part of their charge is that we've been talking about is considering, you know, the impacts of all these developments on the town. And part of that is going to be financial and the liability that the town has taken in with the other projects that have just been approved, and they can't necessarily know what the next. So yeah, that's where
it's fairly, no, it's a good question. It's fairly common for people to come out and say, you must be getting a kickback from the developer. They're going to bring in all this money and you're going to get a kickback, and therefore you're just doing this for taxes. The actual fact of the matter is, that's what you elect people about.
Well, I think part of the concerns was actually that not enough taxes were going to be paid by some of the new developments.
Oh, absolutely, because of the opportunity zone.
Right.
Right. And I don't know, this was raised at the public hearing, and it's not something I've had time to figure out. I don't know how the opportunity zone got placed where it did in the first place. There was a
poverty designation of our census tract because of the Yukon.
Right, but there was an understanding that potentially your town had to apply to be considered for this, and I don't know under which administration and what the discussion was of applying to do this.
It was under the last director of planning and zoning.
So these exist. They are in Mansfield, despite the fact that we have a relatively high area median income because of the existence of Yukon. And the proximity to Willimantic, which is a much more economically disadvantaged community. But as far as I understand it, when you come to a public hearing and you ask questions of the development team, they're not going to have answers about questions, and no one on the zoning commission is going to have answers about taxes. And no one in our office is going to have answers about taxes. So it's just one of those things of like, if you're like, why aren't you paying more taxes? Like we can't answer that question, which is why it will often be this isn't the time.
Well, it's the assessor who is the one responsible for assessing property and therefore setting the taxes on that property.
Now if there is a tax lien that is requested, that goes through the council. Now I believe the hub is requesting some sort of a tax lien potentially. I don't know where they are in the process. They're nowhere with my department after they were approved. They haven't come back for even a preliminary discussion of zoning permits. So I don't know how far away they are. I know there was some discussion with business, but again, this is all preliminary. But that is at council. And so that is the time. If taxes are being waived because of local decisions, tax waivers have to be a council decision. So then, and there must be a public hearing. So in that case, you would go to council. Unfortunately, the opportunity zone is not local.
Yeah, no, I get that. I figured it was
those
lines.
Does any of this have to do with the sort of statutory timelines that get started once an application is received? Like, I don't really understand them all, but is moving the public hearing out of that 30 or 60 or 90-day time period, is that part of what's also driving some of the
when we get a public hearing up here with a zone change, we get as much time as we want.
That's what I'm saying. So when the application is submitted after that public hearing, is that when that clock starts?
So there's the first public hearing, right? So you submit an application. So we can have as much time, because no application is submitted when we're doing our conceptual development review, as much time as you want to discuss it. As much time back and forth with the planning and zoning decision to say, we don't like this, take more time, come back, get as much time as you want. The moment an application is submitted, yes, there is a statutory timetable when you call a public hearing. It's a thing by state statute. But I do have to.
Sorry, there's also, I mean, the clock that starts when an applicant submits versus when the town
receives,
approves or denies the application. Isn't there a ticking clock on?
There are ticking clocks on literally all of those things. Yes. Okay. But the actual reason for moving this first is so that way we don't get into situations where stuff technically gets to the final approval step because it met our technical goals and we don't want it, but we are being told by our attorneys, if you deny this, you don't have a good reason to deny it. Right. They're going to appeal us and we're going to get destroyed and we're going to waste millions of taxpayer dollars in the meantime, which is something we've heard people also don't like, is wasting millions of taxpayer dollars. Yes.
So one question I have then is sort of like, so you have a floating zone.
Yes.
And someone, looked at the location when you take into account arterial and connector routes and property that fit these the other criteria in terms of lot sizes and whatever. And what they said was about more than half of those potential floating zone properties were in the northwest sector, which is already the sector that has been most impacted by development to date. So would that be taken into account? Said you're less likely to be approved because this is already overdeveloped relative to other parts of town, or not?
So that's a great question.
The other way.
So
well, I don't know.
Well, fundamentally,
you could go both ways.
Fundamentally, that is a question for the elected officials. The problem with this, of course, is that the benefit of this is that you have a fantastic group of people on your side if they're on your side, and that's the elected officials. And if the elected officials are against massively hyping this, then and getting development through, then it will be slow walked as they check every I and dot every T, or strike that, reverse it. The problem is that if you happen to have an incredibly development happy board, they will rush things through. Now, I would argue that already happens in many other towns based on that split. But nicely, if there has already been a large amount of development and people come out at the public hearing with the conceptual site plan and say, look, this is already overdeveloped. We have over 1,000 units of new housing that has gone in up here, and we have not felt development impact. I would argue, knowing the people on that board who are sitting in it right now, and the average board member who is a somewhat reasonable person who cares about their neighbors, they'll listen to you, and they'll have a very solid leg to stand on when it comes to this area is already overdeveloped. It's already under too much development pressure.
And it will have an increased impact on
cumulative impact
Brook,
on
which
the
is
natural
a
resources.
Class 1 watershed.
Yes,
so,
it is.
I think some of our point is that we do trust our elected leaders, but we also need clear, explicit language in our regulations that
there needs to be a list
are
of
long-term
So
framework for the kinds of development that most community members want to see.
So fortunately, we do still have all of our other regulations that apply, right? So this doesn't get rid of anything in our performance standards. All of our stormwater, noise, erosion, sediment control, parking, lighting, traffic, landscaping, that is all still true. You still have to meet all of those. You still need to meet your architectural and design standards. And any engineer, any applicant who is coming in to really try to do this is going to come in with this stuff already figured out earlier on, because if they go through the first process and find out that it's not feasible to implement this stuff later, then they have to go back, because your plan, your district is only good for whatever development plan gets approved. If you change your master development plan from anything more than my curve, which was a straight line, is now a curve, it's a material change, you go back to the start.
Presumably, you're going to augment some of this with the additional things that we've talked about.
Yes.
In terms of performance standards or design standards, right? Because you had that whole category. These are
yes. So stuff that we're working. Talk about other stuff that we are working on. We have, is that after this? Where is the stuff we're working on slide? I have a stuff we're working on slide. Did it not make it in here? All right, to just talk about stuff we're working on then. Other things I'm working on. So I already talked about the superficial aquifer protections and improving our LID to get more low impact development on sites in places where it makes sense. We are working on improving our dark skies regulations because we're interested in making sure that we don't have excess light pollution. There was some really good movement on that. There was both model regulations that came out, which I have many problems with, but I think are doing a really good job in certain ways. And there are regulations that were to change the state building code to make a lot more lighting have to be low intensity, warm night lights. We're working on adopting all those to improve that. We are working on improving our climate smart stuff, because as we go through forward with our 2025 POCD, we have a lot more data now of what's been happening and a lot more expectations of what's going to go forward.
Are we talking about stormwater management or how climate?
Stormwater management is part of it, but also resiliency of natural plantings, which are going to be heat tolerant in order to increase shade and reduce heat island effect, things like that.
How about buffer between developed areas and resources like wetlands and water courses? I mean, the standard is 10 feet, if that, from
Yes.
The wetlands behind.
So
it's 50 feet now, right?
Well, it is 50 feet now, as long as you are, the thing about the standard is a redevelopment. So with the way that our regulations are written now, you have to leave existing buffers in place. If there is natural vegetation between you and a wetland, that stays up to 50 feet. The standard did not have 50 feet of natural vegetation.
Up to. So as little as 10 feet? Up to
The standard
50 feet?
had 10 feet.
No, when you said up to 50 feet.
Sorry.
Is there a minimum?
Minimum? No. So
we don't have a protection of that 50 feet.
You do have a protection of that 50 feet, unless it's already developed. The way this regulation is written is
You had to leave whatever.
there's a parking
buffer
lot
was
there and it's next to the
existing up
stream,
until
you must make it no worse. You must make it no worse is the way this
Right.
regulation is written,
I
because
don't wanna confuse redevelopment
Yeah.
and development.
No.
I mean,
So
it's
this is
different,
a reason we wrote it this way. People who could take an uncharitable view of this would say that it's a weasel word, and I'm secretly a smog belching businessman who wants to destroy the wetlands and finds ways to help businesses do that. The actual reason that we wrote it that way is because of pre-existing statute and ensuring that people who have driveways within 30 feet of wetlands don't have to go for a variance every time they need to redo their driveway. We have to have some reasonable degree of this. And there's always a barrier also of inhibiting massive developers without terribly inconveniencing townspeople to the point that you turn them against government as an institution because all you do is get in their way. I'm sure that people who work for various government institutions would know nothing about that attitude.
I guess,
So of course,
can we approach wetlands and watercourses as in this particular set? I don't know. We're just looking for more buffer between that is a clear setback as opposed to something that can be
So
discretionary.
what you get is you get 50, if we're developing a new site, 50 feet of natural vegetation minimum stays. It's just that if you were developing a site like the standard, where you were built up to 10 feet away from the wetlands, you had to leave that 10 feet.
except that they changed the course of the stream.
That's an opportunity to reclaim.
on the-
Which
But you can make it better, and with this new system, we say, we prefer you make it better, or we're not gonna land your zone.
And they can say, no, thanks.
And we'll say, all right,
And is that in writing?
Yeah, I don't know.
yes, it's all in writing, because we can demand anything with the zones.
Was that what the standard did, is they say, we'll make it better by changing the course of the stream?
I don't know the course of the stream because that got started before I got here, and I haven't been through hundreds of pages of documents.
If you look at the aerial photographs of that aerial.
Oh, I'm sorry. Are you talking about the damage that they did?
No, they changed the course of the stream. Not only did they clear cut it,
Yes.
they changed the course of the stream.
Yes.
If you look at it before and after.
Yes, we're talking about that. And I know you have problems with Land Tech, our reviewer, but Land Tech, our reviewer, noted the change of the course of the stream when we were out for one of our site inspections and said, with the small change in the course of the stream here, in Land Tech, which is a certified wetland scientist, Tom Ryder's opinion, you could remove it, but if you do remove it, you're also causing disturbance to the wetland. This is a relatively small bump out in the stream. The small amount of the curve that was created by moving the stream.
Across.
What?
I did that to create a more convenient place to put the bridge across.
Well, they're putting the bridge in the same place. I can talk about that later. I was out there today.
Okay, just,
Yes, for their temporary mess. Yes, they did a bad thing. You're correct.
with no consequence.
No, there is a consequence. Spend a lot of money on restoring it.
Over it now is just gonna keep us from
Yeah,
sleeping.
I think you were trying to, we hijacked when you were trying to tell us about things that were still being worked on.
Yes, so we are working on better aquifer protections, better lighting, climate smart practices. We are working on inserting all those things. We do have a protection of our wetlands. We genuinely do have a protection of our wetlands. 50 feet where natural vegetation exists, it stays. It's just when redevelopments happen, the goal is make it no worse or improve it. And considering the amount of stormwater treatment going on that property, it can easily be argued that the health of that wetland is going to benefit because it hasn't lost any existing buffer, but all of the water that was previously coming across a decaying industrial parkland is being improved and treated. Is it perfect? No. It's not perfect. It's far from perfect. It could have been done much better if they were willing to accept much more profit cuts, and they could have done that if they could only build 227 units on the property, eliminating 170 units and allowing them to pull away from wetlands. which is another
that
part
amount
of
of
this.
activity within 10 feet is just degrading, right? So whether or not the water is going into the wetland or not, just the activity and the, so. But I think let's get back to what you're actually presenting rather than rehash that project.
Basically, the other thing that we're working on right now is with regards to smart growth, another fun buzzword that you put in there. We would argue that much of this is smart growth practices because it's allowing us to assess where it makes sense for us to have dense housing, which is part of smart growth. But one of the other things that is related to in smart growth is figuring out what we can do with missing middle housing, which is another fun buzzword, which is essentially the naturally occurring affordable housing that exists in a lot of cities is old converted single family homes that have become multifamily housing. We see a lot of it in Willimantic. The houses like this are often inhibited by modern zoning practices because it becomes impossible in certain zones to convert a single family house into a duplex or triplex. There's all sorts of stuff happening with the building code with that. But because of how zoning works, in many ways becomes hard to build a 6-unit big house or convert an existing 4-unit house or convert an existing house into 4 units of housing. There we go, the English language. We are working on new regulations. At the beginning, I noted that this regulation is for all new developments that are more than 6 units. We are working on new regulations for that 2 to 6 units of housing on a single property to try to promote turning of older, larger houses or building of new large house style housing for this 5 or 6 units on a lot. The goal here being it will still look like New England vernacular architecture and have that feel of a smaller development, but helps promote housing density. These types of units often become the kind of naturally occurring low-cost housing that helps our poorer citizens find housing.
It seems around here, though, that it often becomes just student housing.
There are only so many things we can plan around Yukon for. But yes, the conversion of many houses into student housing is a problem. But where, for example, you already have an existing 2-unit, saying to that property owner, you could rebuild this and make it a 6-unit. That is the kind of thing where if you get enough units, it can be worth the capital investment to do that. We get a bunch of old houses that are not in great shape, replace them with new housing stock, which is rebuilt to modern standards, create 4 additional units, which eventually, through the power of competition, will drive down prices. But it's only doable if you have parking and septic or you're on sewer. So it's not going to necessarily create the types of infrastructural strain which we are always worried about.
And I think this is actually important as part of what I would characterize as a housing strategy plan.
Yep.
You need multiple sorts of things. And I think, you can be very creative with using this $5 million, in different ways. It doesn't have to be big. It can be these smaller sorts of things. I think that's all. And again, you should look at what other towns are doing, what their history has been of doing this sort of stuff. I think it's important in terms of coming up with an overall strategy for a housing plan for the town, as opposed to letting it all being driven by the developers.
Right.
Student housing, that was all.
Well, I'm just imagining these roads with all these currently duplex raised ranches and everything, and them all turning into just a row of 6 family raised ranches.
Now, of course, the thing about that is, in order to do that, you still need a minimum amount of square footage on the lots. We've been doing a lot of work on this. You need a minimum amount of square footage on the lots, and a lot of these are on very small lots, such that they could at most go up to 3 or 4 units. So it's not going to be quite as massive. You still need the septic or sewer tie-in. You still need parking. You still need to be able to meet all of those standards, such that you can't just see a massive explosion of this, but in some of the houses that have become student housing that are currently single family houses, turning those into a duplex or triplex as long as it meets architectural standards, which are also designing for this to make these kinds of things blend into neighborhoods as opposed to stand out as, wow, that's big.
That's across all IR 90. That you can do that. You can turn a single family into a duplex or triplex.
No, the plan for these is to require that you can tie into it. I think we're right now considering that you can tie into certain utilities. You either need to be able to tie into sewer, water, or you need to be on a very large lot such that you can have a septic that has up to 6 units of residence. But a lot of that is controlled by health code, and we don't control that. But the plan is to make sure that it's not an overall infrastructural strain.
And there are ways to actually design, this is where you talk to an architect, there are ways to design houses so that they are not appealing to students. Now, student housing here means one central place, a kitchen, and then 4 bedrooms off of that. If you design it in such a way that it doesn't have that, then you get around the student problem. It's not going to appeal to students.
No, but by and large, they aren't allowed to have a lot of the regulations that would to determine what people do build and how they build it.
But you can do it with architectural planning, and this is again part of that too, to make it
that is left up to
more appealing to families, less appealing to students.
The number of bathrooms per bedrooms and things like that, yeah, but when I've talked to Jennifer about it, she says, so that's not in our control ultimately, it's the developer.
No, but if you have that $5 million, you can develop this as you see fit.
In general, we can't easily control floor plan. Floor plan is one of the things that we really struggle with, and we wish we would control floor plan, because you're absolutely right. There are certain types of housing with exactly that layout that are great for students and not great for other types of residents. But unfortunately, because of the underlying charge of zoning being something that is promoting public health, safety, welfare, zoning has a lot less structure, has a lot less ability to regulate the moment you are inside a structure. And uses have to be blind to the people who are doing them, such that it's the same kind of protected classes thing that we're used to for a whole bunch of regulations. So you can regulate the outside of a building with its architectural standards and the way it looks and buildings and clapboard siding and all these things, but you can't easily regulate the layout of a building. We can require that you have all sorts of things, and things must be a certain distance from things at times, but architects are, frankly, much better at coming up with creative layouts that work for students than we are at predicting them.
So the question then I have, because one of my friends is the architect who designed the one on South Eagleville, whether that is student oriented in terms of, I haven't asked her this design, but she designed it. Yes.
That one's
that one is not student.
Well, then she's an architect that designed it so that it doesn't appeal to students then. You see, it can be done.
It can be done.
And it's done in this case.
But students, because of the way that whole project is structured and funded and everything.
Yeah.
Eagleville Green is basically
I thought it was protected, it was affordable.
It's low, it is protected.
Yeah.
34 of its units are.
But part of it is the workforce, is
but
associate and assistant professors.
No comment, but what I was just saying is that I think that what you're asking for is not something that actually they can regulate, which is what.
Not regulate, but you can, you know, if you are.
We can encourage.
If you are co-funding this in part.
Encouragement only goes so far.
You can then squeeze it so that it fits into that. This is a
yes,
creative
we're
use
co-funding. That $5 million.
Of that now $5 million that is.
I agree with you that we need to have a discussion about what's the creative use of the $5 million that we get the most bang for our buck for getting consistent, affordable housing. That's not going to be used by that's not going to be monopolized by students who, under some metrics, qualify for affordable housing because they have no income, but under other metrics, which we have been trying to make people adopt, they don't. So, all that said, I'm
sorry. Well, I'm sorry. I'm giving you such a hard time, but
no. I take this not as a personal attack on me, Michael Stankov, the person. I assume this is the ringer of the regulations because you're making all of you are making good points of how do we actually get what we want and how do we make people think about these things from early on and then try to future-proof this as much as possible. So insofar as the stuff to think about adding, here's kind of, this is most of the presentation. The notes that I got from you all in terms of things that you'd really like to see at various points in the process. These are the things we're repealing at some point. One of the things I think what I didn't mention is we're getting rid of the fee in lieu. We want people to build their housing.
Well, I don't know.
Housing.
Based on my comment here about the $5 million, you get leverage in deciding what happens. I would say that's a double-sided.
It very much
double-sided here, and I would say don't necessarily throw the baby out with
the bathwater,
because you get leverage as opposed to more student housing that you don't have control over.
I appreciate the spirit of what you're saying, John, but I don't think $5 million is a lot of leverage with the amount of money that's flying around.
I mean, 3 billion of that was for that development that's being crammed in there next to Ted's Bar or whatever it is, that it's in that tiny little space. It's also disrupting that. There's the whole water course you're talking about there and everything. I'm not sure that 3 million is.
Well, I'd say don't have that as perhaps an option, but don't necessarily throw it out. You can use this now as, and it could be, I don't know what, a 10% or 20% enough to maybe encourage. I mean, the other thing is, you know, we don't have any senior housing here or sufficient senior housing. We don't have any CCRCs here, so that can leverage into it, and that's a particular kind of design that is not going to appeal to students. So there's different ways to
senior housing absolutely is, and senior housing is one of those things where you can discriminate against other people, which makes it very good for drawing the people who you want. But the difficulty with it is we have had two different groups who have been in talks with the town of how to bring senior housing here since shortly before I was hired, and then I was part of one of them. And Masonicare and Seabury. They are both struggling with the walkability of Mansfield. For seniors, walkability, access to a hot urban core with a lot of amenities is critical. Mansfield's walkability suffers because, as has been mentioned in other communities that you're on, Miranda, the town of Mansfield is hills and wetlands, and that's it. There's nothing else. If there was flat land, we used it and we built on it, and it's Yukon. So there's
a beautiful site.
Where is it?
Mansfield Apartments, now vacant with no plans for.
If you would like to,
no plans.
If you would like to begin lobbying Yukon to sell that to a developer, we'd be very happy. We here at the town of Mansfield would love to have that kind of development come to town with access to town center.
And you run out of money to do anything over there.
We have heard this.
You have a wonderful list though of our
the points that I have here are we want to consider the in the approval criteria. We want conservation items such as groundwater separation, existing groundwater quality, cumulative impacts of nearby developments, consideration of low impact development, consideration of climate consciousness. John's points on here include sustainability development, as well as both climate smart planning and smart growth. These are all things that we'd like to see in design considerations, how you're meeting those things. I talked about some of the development that I'm improving. There's a question that was raised in here concerning the development review and what exactly happens with the master plan development of exactly what degree of information is needed there in terms of engineering, because as we often find out, the devil is in the details. Yeah. And if you don't need a large amount of engineering here, but you do need it here, and you do have a public hearing, you do have a public hearing here when you don't have it, and you don't have a public hearing here when you do have it, then the only place to catch it is wetlands, which has a limited purview. So that is, I think, your major concern. And so what I'm going to...
There could be a lot of time in the detail. On the concept, and then they get down into it, and they're like, well, like the hub couldn't put any subsurface stormwater management in it because there was ledge or something.
And of course, we couldn't control that because that was an awkward one where that was the state's waterway. But even regardless of that, yes, the devil was in the details there. But we would get to see that for wetlands, but yes.
So there's both those design details between master development plan and site plan application, as well as a question of who reviews the site plan application to make sure it's consistent with everything that came before it.
That's PZC, it gets both, Michael?
Yeah, PZC gets both. So it's PZC, IWA, PCC, which of course in this town is the same group of people, and there is a broader discussion during the next charter revision about whether that makes sense or not. However,
blowing up on the CT planning email thing right now.
We're one of the few towns that have it combined.
I am aware.
Almost every other town in the state has separate.
Yeah, there's a lot of talk about that.
I'm aware.
I think it's manipulated ever, but I think it might be difficult to take off that hat in the same meeting about, I think it would be better if it's separate, but I'm curious to hear what the town thinks about it.
At a forthcoming meeting.
As planning staff, we're gonna refrain, but I will write in addition to what's the engineering, who reviews? Presumably, right, would you want the same reviewer as staff to look at the plan again, to validate the same outside reviewer? Do you want the same viewer, or do you want two separate sets of eyes?
I think we want to avoid a bait and switch what
yes,
you do. So I think
consistency.
I think the people who are reviewing that site plan for consistency with the master development plan need to have either the purview or the technical knowledge to be able to do so.
Right.
And they've already engaged in the conversation with the applicant kind of from the beginning of the process to know kind of what's been discussed and where things are supposed to go.
So yes.
Did you write anything down about my whole thing about the cumulative impacts and anything that?
Yes, I did write that down. Both the cumulative impacts of nearby development, consideration of cooling down period.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
I just want to ask, there's some longer items also still on the agenda. Are those for further discussion, or is that?
That is all the backup for this.
Okay.
So to just stop sharing here and just go over to B and C. So this is just all the backup of what we're repealing, our street classifications, our architectural standards. All of this is pertaining to this.
Okay.
I failed to actually delete the B and C on the agenda. That was all supposed to be under A. So that was just my mistake.
No, I say great.
But if that is the bulk of this body's comments, which I think are good and comprehensive, and I think we can start working on integrating, what I can do is I will, if you do go through these and look through our full draft regulations, these are 11 pages that do have more about what are our design considerations, of what are our neighborhood connections, full concept, what are these things supposed to be looking at? This is our checklist. So this is the sub bullets of that thing. And please feel free to go through these and provide me comments back if you, I know you're all people who have tons of free time and are never busy or jet setting off to the next place.
This is online.
This is online, so this is on your agenda. This is in your packet. Yep, this is in your packet under C.
So I can go back
so feel free.
These are being updated though, as other comments come in or whether we.
Yep, so we're updating them, and you'll see the updated ones on the 15th of July.
Fine, fine. I'm happy. I'm happy to see all of this sort of being flushed out. I know it's a pain to have to do all of this, but I think it's incredibly important that this is done now.
It's important. It needs to be transparent. It needs to be done now, and it needs to be done with a lot of feedback. So it's important to have these discussions and figure it out. With all of that said, in addition to going through these, I can, for you, John, and for anyone else who wants to know, I can talk to Tyche about where they took the model for these regulations.
Right.
Because I do know there are other towns that are adopting these kinds of things. But I will look into exactly where we modeled these off of and what other towns are doing for them. Floating zones in some ways have fallen out of fashion for certain things, but for complex developments like this, having this lever of control has proven important for several
communities. And my only comment on that is it would be useful to see sort of what other towns have done, and particularly those that have had it for a while, and whether there's, sort of the pluses and minuses. All of this is going to be pluses and minuses. I'd like to kind of have that as part of sort of your.
I don't know, like contacting that town to pick their brain a little bit about like what's worked and what hasn't, or something like that. I'm sure Tyche might have some of that information, but just trying to learn from their process or their mistakes.
Tyche's president is the president of the Connecticut Association of Zoning Enforcement Officers, so very hooked into what's going on with zoning regs around the state. But all that said, if anyone has any other points, just email me. And I very much want your feedback. I want to make these regs strong and make sure that we have environmental principles from the start in these new developments to get stuff that is good and well designed and thinking about climate for the future. Because as we've all seen, with all of the incredible records we're smashing every year and now every day this week, it's hot world.
Right, and these are just buzzwords that I put in here.
I know. I am familiar with most of these.
But I just wanted to put those in there as kind of placeholders.
I just want to remind folks that in emailing, those go directly to Michael. They don't go to everybody because then it's considered.
Yes, just send stuff to me.
So go directly to Michael.
If you want to get together to work on something, let me know and I will reserve rooms and times. I just have to post that you're together working on stuff. I don't even need to be there. But it's about public accessibility to places where decisions are being made.
Does anybody want to get together and have a time for a special meeting to talk about this in more detail before our next meeting, which is like, I don't know, the
July 17th.
Thank you. Is anybody interested in that, or people would like to review on their own and then can send stuff to Michael? We can have a discussion. We would just need to create an official meeting.
And you can do it via Zoom. You can set it up entirely via virtual, and then it's just I throw the Zoom on and it's just you guys talking about stuff and working through things. So it's visible for people.
I may be able to do this, but it would be virtual until beginning of September. So
yeah.
Think about it. If you're
15.
What's that?
When does I was going to ask for clarification.
So our next meeting for PZC ends July 15. However, we're leaving the public hearing open, I think, through the end of August. So
you said September.
Yeah, I can't recall if the period that we have to close the public hearing ends in September before the first meeting or after it. So we're at least done through August. I can't recall if we have a meeting in September where we can continue receiving comments. I will look at the statutory period for that.
Is that just coincidental that it happens over the summer when most of the people in town are not here?
It's just coincidental.
Can I just say this has happened twice in town before in my 10 years here, where big public comment periods fall in July and August, and it seems like a poor time for public comment solicitation.
You're not wrong. It's very unfortunate. You're welcome. It is an unfortunate timing knowing the tempo of this town. Originally, the public hearing was for 6 months. It was a September to March public hearing.
Yeah.
And we just didn't have the regs done. We have already had some members of the board say that they absolutely don't want to extend this again because they think it's evidence of a failing that we can't get our shit together, to speak very bluntly on recording. And they don't like that it could be interpreted as us doing our damnedest to not build affordable housing. So because while we've stopped this, there's nothing stopping people coming in with an 8:30 J. So, which is a whole other thing I can talk to you about but I won't because it's 9 o'clock.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Let me tell you about a thing. The Standard at Four Corners, way up there. Today they installed the first stuff for the crossing. So they are beginning their work on getting the bridge in. What this will look like if you drive past it is that the abutments. What this will look like if you drive past it is that they have created a temporary bridge by which to drive equipment over the stream and not touch the stream. This involved a series of erosion control, fencing, and hay bales with tamped down stone on the edges of the stream, so it's not in the stream, with mafia blocks on top of it, which are these large concrete blocks, and steel plate over it. So basically you can drive equipment over it and it stays out of the stream the whole time. This allows them to get equipment to the far side of the embankment so they can actually do the foundations for the bridge. We requested that they attempt to work with the abutting southerly property owners to get a temporary access easement, and that went nowhere because of liability from both of the entities that were involved. So we don't know what
Which leads
happened.
to more potential impacts.
Which is why we were very involved in having many engineering eyes on this of what is the way we can make sure we touch the least wetland possible and the least failure chance possible. So they will have equipment out there for the next couple of days working on getting that foundation in for the large abutment. Hypothetically, once that is in and the earthwork on the far side is done, they walk the equipment back over, pull out the temporary disturbance, and there needs to be nothing else in the wetland because the bridge will just drop onto place and then can be secured with hand tools. So that is what you will see if you were up there. I was out there today looking at that. I will be out there again on Monday because I believe they're supposed to be doing more work there on Monday. My report of like, I don't know, 2 septic systems I approved that are like 100 feet from wetlands.
Yeah,
is
the
that
garage deck. Actually.
Yeah, okay.
Is this gonna be like a Golden Gate Bridge? I mean, like conceptually, it's not a bridge for a vehicle to go.
That's true.
Can we, you guys want to talk about this after? I really,
Fine.
I got several hours of work to still do tonight, so I just want to, I can go and you guys can adjourn?
No.
Later?
We're gonna be done?
We're done.
We're done?
Anything else?
Meg, Will?
Reports from members at all? No? All right, thanks Meg, thanks Will for being here. See you guys here in July, we'll see you next time. July 17th is our next regular meeting. That is correct. All right, 9:01. Nice job, Michael, everybody.
Good night, all.
Motion to adjourn?
Great. Good night.